Welcome. Hi. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, fellow citizens of Earth. Thank you for being here. We're all together in this moment, and it feels great. Welcome to a special collaboration between Peninsula Players Theater and Chicago Radio Theater as we proudly present our live audio production of The Murders in the Rue Morgue by Edgar Allan Poe. 40 years before Arthur Conan Doyle created Sherlock, 80 years before Agatha Christie brought us Poirot and Miss Marple, Edgar Allan Poe penned this, the grandparent of detective fiction. This is the story that started it all, folks. Since his own mysterious death in Baltimore, Maryland, 171 years ago this month, Mr. Poe's spirit, he was telling me, has been in limbo. He was noticing that we here on the material plane have been in quite a limbo of our own recently, and he thought we might enjoy an escape into a nightmare of his own creation. He was very generous in collaborating on the adaptation. Cheers, Edgar. This one's for you. Tonight, because our play is a dark mystery, we're going to do things a little differently. And to get you in the mood, we'll uncover the shocking and macabre goings-on backstage before the show. Have you ever wondered, just before the show begins, what are those actors up to? I will be your backstage detective. Quietly, please. This way. Let's check in with the ladies first. Everyone decent? Oh, there's Erica Elam. She's warming up. Ooh, terrifying. And that's Allison, jogging in place, doing tongue twisters.
Give me the gift of a grip-top sock.
Have a good show.
Thank you.
And some of you may have heard of this fellow, Gregory Winkler. Of course, he has his own dressing room. Typically, he refuses to speak to the living before a performance, but let's see if we can get him to... oh my. Just peeking through the crack in the door here, I can see Greg is in his typical warm-up clothing, a neutral mask, floor-length black robes, and that's all. He's sitting stone still at the 171-year-old piano he had flown in from France and installed in his dressing room. Mr. Winkler?
Enter!
Good evening, sir. Sorry to disturb you, sir. I'll come back another time.
No. That's okay. Actually, I'm glad you're here because it gives me a chance to say the Peninsula Players Theater has a free play reading series up in Door County every winter called The Play's the Thing, which has been very popular for some years now. This year's program got interrupted, so for those friends who enjoyed attending and for those friends who could never be there, we present this very live play reading, our autumn edition of The Play's the Thing. And thank you, Kevin, for helping make this happen. Now, you must leave me. I am getting ready to act.
Yes, sir. Once again, that was Peninsula Players artistic director Greg Winkler in a rare and 100% unplanned pre-show conversation. What a pleasant fellow, and what a great organization and community they've built with their patrons. Okay, and here's Foley artist Ellie Maitland, relaxing and reading the newspaper, it looks like. Fast reader. My goodness, Ellie, is that an antique? Does it work? Gosh, I've never seen a gramophone this old. It's recording us now? Amazing. Oh, you want to play cards? I have to go hit a sound cue in a minute. I don't know if this is the best time to... Oh, sorry, I get it. You want me to shuffle off because you want to run a sequence. Okay, Kevin out. Have a great show, Ellie. Finally, last stop before we start. My name's Kevin. I adapted and directed tonight's soiree, and I would usually be hiding behind you in the back of the mezzanine, but tonight, to the absolute delight of the actors, I'm pacing around backstage, and I've set up camp in this dressing room here with Mike and Neil. You guys are good with this, right?
Heavens!
There's my robe.
Ha!
And the bottle of champagne chilling for after the show.
What? Here?
Mike has lots of exclamations in the show. I think he's...
Remarkable.
Shall I let you get on with that then?
Perfection.
And Neil, oh, look at this work ethic. He's playing a very physical role in this show. He's been running 7 miles every morning by the lake, and now, before every show, he does this sequence. It's like nothing I've ever seen. He does a jumping jack. He drops to the floor for 3 one-armed push-ups. And somehow he vaults himself into the air and backflips, landing on one foot and leaps up, doing a pull-up off the heating pipe.
Yeah. Hup. Ho.
Okay, I'll leave it to you, Mr. Friedman. All right, there was your quick peek into the dark and mysterious workings of theater people backstage. I'll let you folks in the audience get back to your seats, and we'll get this campfire started. With you today, we happy few, are Allison Selby Cook as Dupin, Mike Jimerson as Marshall in the past, Greg Winkler as Marshall in the present, Erica Elam as Charlotte, Neil Friedman as the sailor, and Ellie Maitland creating live Foley sounds. Original music is by Christopher Kriz. And now, from 7 closets and desks all over Chicago, coming to you 100% live, Peninsula Players and Chicago Radio Theater proudly present The Murders in the Rue Morgue by Edgar Allan Poe. The play takes place in Paris, the summer of 1837, as recalled by our narrator 50 years later.
Now, before I tell it, we must talk of whist. Yes, the game. The card game. Oh, odd name, I know. Invented some 2 centuries before this one, Charlotte, but still quite relevant now.
Pardon, Uncle. Perhaps I should begin the recording machine if you feel this is pertinent to the story?
No, certainly not. This bit is just between you and me, all right? The story will get its due. Now leave that confounded thing and listen close. It may seem immaterial, but it's the window you have to see the whole thing through. It's the window. Oh, whist. Now the name, it comes from the word meaning quiet, silent, attentive. Dupin was all those as a player, and she was radiant. She told me,
"There is nothing like whist to exercise the faculty of analysis, divining what matters beyond the limits of mere rule. The necessary knowledge is that of what to observe. Our proficient player rejects nothing for possible deduction in or out of the game. She examines the countenance of her partner. She considers the mode of card arrangement in each hand. She notes every variation of face as the play progresses. Certainty, surprise, triumph, chagrin. These clues are the 4th dimension of the game, Marshall."
Oh, I've seen her do it. After 2 or 3 rounds of play, she has divined the contents of each hand, and thenceforward she plays her cards with the confidence as though the other players sat with their cards face up.
Genuine analytical power should not be confounded with common ingenuity, for while the analyst is necessarily ingenious, the ingenious man is often remarkably incapable of analysis.
Uncle, you're saying this other dimension of whist is the window to the mystery? A card game?
The apple doesn't fall far. Anyhow, the harrowing story you've asked me to tell you tonight, you may find somewhat in the light of a commentary upon the propositions I've just advanced. Which is a fancy enough way of saying, "Dear Charlotte, you're welcome in advance for the perspective." And now that contraption will produce a physical record of our talking, you say?
Indeed, it's quite new. I push this here, or you may, if you like, push just there, and it's recorded onto this here.
Oh, well, makes no sense to me, but then I'm only ingenious, as Dupin would say. No, it would take someone with real, genuine imagination to dream up a concoction like that you have there. Are you sure it even works?
I am as sure of this recorder as you are of your story. But indeed, how can we trust you as a narrator? Can we? You've said it was so long ago.
Oh, of course you can. Look, here's your trust. Look in these eyes. You see it? Where I may never have developed the sheer imaginative brilliance of Mademoiselle Dupin, she always said my accurate memory of the things I did observe was part of my ingeniousness. Though she'd almost say it in a way that didn't feel like a compliment. Well, now, if you were ever going to do it, push that confounded devicey business, and pass me my pipe. Oh, this story is burned in my brain. No, I remember it like it was last week. The story of Mademoiselle Dupin and the murders in the Rue Morgue. And yet...
Yes.
I read it in my journal now. It doesn't feel like me. Yes. Almost in another lifetime. I recall little of why I went to Paris, but there I was. Residing in Paris during that spring and part of the summer, I there became acquainted with the singular Mademoiselle C. Augusta Dupin. The young gentlewoman was of an illustrious family, but by a variety of untoward events had been reduced to such poverty that the energy of her character succumbed beneath it, and she ceased to bestir herself in the world, or to care for the retrieval of her fortunes. Books, indeed, were her sole luxuries, and in Paris these are easily obtained. Our first meeting was at an obscure library in the Montmartre.
Forgive the intrusion, ma'am, but I heard you inquiring after an edition of the Sheridan play, Jupiter?
Yes, but not just any edition. What do you know of it?
I've heard a story for years that there's an edition of this, his first play, published before he realized it was a farce.
6 known and traceable copies immediately sold by the only cast to read it.
Evidently so tragically unsuccessful as a drama that the small audience attending developed...
Paroxysms of laughter, yes. A friend in faux consolement advised that maybe he should intentionally make it a comedy.
You know, the journey to locate it is rewarding in itself, but I've further begun to suspect there is an almost macabre curiosity that drives me.
Is that so?
We saw each other again and again. I felt my soul enkindled within me by the wild fervor and the vivid freshness of her imagination. I felt that the society of such a person would be to me a treasure beyond price. And this feeling I frankly confided to her. It was arranged that we should live together during my stay in the city. I was permitted to be at the expense of renting and furnishing in a style which suited the rather fantastic gloom of our common temper. It was a time-eaten and grotesque mansion in a desolate portion of the Faubourg Saint-Germain. Our seclusion was perfect. We admitted no visitors. We existed within ourselves alone. It was a freak of fancy in my friend to be enamored of the night for its own sake, and into this bizarrerie I quietly fell, giving myself up to her whims with abandon. When darkness began to soak out the daylight, we sallied forth into the streets, arm in arm. We roamed far and wide until a late hour, seeking, amid the wild lights and shadows of the populous city, that infinity of mental excitement which quiet observation can afford. At such times I could not help remarking and admiring a peculiar analytic ability in Dupin. She seemed to take an eager delight in its exercise. In fact, I recall one night on the Pont Neuf, she was rather boastful.
You might as well give voice to that thought, Marshal. My fellow humans' bosoms are as windows to me.
Whatever do you mean, Dupin?
Or don't.
Oh, come on, how could you possibly know?
What would follow were direct and startling proofs of her intimate knowledge of my private thoughts, sometimes to my monumental embarrassment. Her manner in these moments was clinical, abstract. Her eyes were vacant in expression, and her voice, well, for an example, we were strolling one night down a long, dirty street in the vicinity of the Palais Royal. Being both occupied with thought, neither of us had spoken a syllable for 15 minutes at least. All at once Dupin broke forth.
He is a very little fellow, that's true, and would do better for the Théâtre des Variétés.
There can be no doubt of that. What?
I had replied unwittingly, but in an instant I realized she had just chimed in on my silent meditations. My astonishment was profound.
Wait, Dupin, this is beyond my comprehension. I do not hesitate to say that I am amazed and can scarcely credit my senses. How is it possible you should know I was thinking of...
Of Chantilly? Why do you pause? You were remarking to yourself that his diminutive figure unfitted him for tragedy.
Why, I was thinking that M. Chantilly, the compact cobbler turned thespian who was lambasted for his turn as
Xerxes.
Yes, in the Crébillon. Might be better received at the Variety Theatre. But tell me, for heaven's sake, the method by which you are able to fathom my soul in this matter.
It was the fruit seller who started you on to the conclusion that the mender of souls was not of sufficient height for Xerxes.
The fruit seller? Ha! I know no fruit seller.
The man who ran up against you as we entered the street. It may have been 15 minutes ago.
Well, I do recall now a fruit seller, a basket of apples on his head, nearly ran me down by accident as we were passing Rue Charlemagne, but what that has to do with Chantilly, I
will explain. We will first retrace the course of your meditations from the moment I spoke backward to that with the fruit seller. The larger links of the chain run thus: Chantilly, Orion, Dr. Nichols, Epicurus, stereotomy, the street stones, the fruit seller.
And she had spoken the truth. What followed was an uncanny geometric proof of the progress of my inner thoughts over 15 minutes, concluding in...
You had been stooping in your gait, but now I saw you draw yourself up to your full height. I was then sure that you reflected upon the diminutive figure of Chantilly. At this point, I interrupted your meditations to remark that being a very little fellow, that Chantilly might do better at the Théâtre des Variétés.
There you see the singular level of observation and imagination at work with Mademoiselle Dupin. Charlotte, this is the precipice. This story, my eyes will never unsee it. If I continue, your ears will never unhear it. Shall I continue?
Yes, please. How can I follow in her footsteps if I do not learn where she's walked? Uncle, don't underestimate me. Chantilly. Dupin guessed at Chantilly. Then what?
Right. So be it. It was only moments after this fruit seller mind divination that we were looking over an evening edition of the Gazette des Tribunaux when the following paragraphs arrested our attention.
Listen, Dupin. Extraordinary murders this morning. About 3 o'clock, the inhabitants of the Quartier Saint-Roch were aroused from sleep by a succession of terrific shrieks, issuing, apparently, from the 4th story of a house in the Rue Morgue, known to be in the sole occupancy of one Madame L'Espanaye and her daughter Mademoiselle Camille L'Espanaye. After some delay, the gateway was broken in with a crowbar, and 8 or 10 of the neighbors entered accompanied by 2 gendarmes. By this time the cries had ceased, but as the party rushed up the first flight of stairs, 2 or more rough voices in angry contention were distinguished, and seemed to proceed from the upper part of the house. As the second landing was reached, these sounds also had ceased, and everything remained perfectly quiet. The party spread themselves and hurried from room to room. Upon arriving at a large back chamber in the 4th story, the door, which was found locked with the key inside, was forced open. There was found a spectacle, striking everyone present with horror and equal astonishment.
A detective present said the apartment was in the wildest disorder, the furniture broken and thrown about in all directions, the mattress removed from the frame and thrown to the floor. On a chair lay a razor besmeared with blood. On the hearth were 2 or 3 long and thick tresses of grey human hair, also dabbled in blood, and seeming to have been pulled out by the roots. Upon the floor were found 4 Napoleon coins, an earring of topaz, 3 large and 3 smaller silver spoons, and 2 bags containing nearly 4,000 francs in gold.
Oh, my.
The drawers of a bureau were open and had been rifled, though many articles still remained in them. A small iron safe was discovered under the bed mattress. It was open with the key still in the door. It had no meaningful contents beyond a few old letters and other papers.
My God, Dupin, look here. Of Madame L'Espanaye, no traces were here seen, but an unusual quantity of soot being observed in the fireplace. A search was made in the chimney, and, horrible to relate, the corpse of the daughter, head downward, was dragged therefrom, it having thus been forced up the narrow aperture for a considerable distance. The body was quite warm. Upon examining it, many excoriations were perceived. Upon the face were many severe scratches, and upon the throat dark bruises and deep indentations of fingernails, as if the deceased had been throttled to death.
Oh dear, there's more. After investigating every portion of the house, the party made its way into a small paved yard in the rear of the building, where lay the corpse of the old lady, with her throat so entirely cut that upon an attempt to raise her, the head fell off.
Oh, dear.
The body, as well as the head, was fearfully mutilated, the former so much so as scarcely to retain any semblance of humanity.
To this horrible mystery there is not as yet, we believe, the slightest clue.
The next day's paper had these additional particulars.
Ah, banner headline, Dupin. The tragedy in the Rue Morgue. It says, many individuals have been examined regarding this extraordinary and frightful affair, but nothing has thrown light upon it. We give below all the material testimony elicited.
Witness Pauline Dubert, laundress. The old lady and her daughter seemed on good terms, very affectionate towards each other. I think Madame L. told fortunes for a living. Heard she had some money put away. You know, it's odd. There was no furniture in any part of the building except in the 4th story where they lived.
Witness Pierre Moreau, tobacconist. He'd been selling small amounts of tobacco and snuff to Madame L'Espanaye for nearly 4 years. The ladies lived a very retired life. I heard they have money. Also heard once that Madame L. told fortunes, but I don't believe that. Really, I have never seen any person leave or enter the door except the old lady, her daughter, maybe a porter once or twice, and, a physician, I guess 8 or 10 times.
Reporter says here, many other persons, neighbors, gave evidence to the same effect. No one was spoken of as frequenting the house. It was not known whether there were any living connections of Madame L. and her daughter. The shutters of the front windows were seldom opened. Those in the rear were always closed, with the exception of the large back room, fourth story.
Witness Isidore Musset, a gendarme officer. I was called to the house about 3 o'clock in the morning. There were 20 or 30 persons at the gate trying to gain admittance. I had some difficulty, but I forced it open with a bayonet. It was these shrieks we could hear from inside. But when the gate got forced open, the shrieks suddenly stopped. The shrieks, they were of some person or persons in great agony. They were loud and drawn out, not short and quick. On the first landing, I heard two voices in loud, angry contention, fighting. The one, a gruff voice. The other, it was much shriller, very strange voice. The gruff was a French man, positive, not a woman's voice. I heard sacré and diable. The shrill voice, it was a foreigner. Can't say man or woman. The language, maybe Spanish.
Witness, Henri Duval, a neighbor. I'm a silversmith. I was in the group that went in the house. I knew both of these ladies, and the shrill voice, it was definitely neither of them. I think it was an Italian man. No, I don't know Italian.
Witness M. Odenheimer, restaurateur. I spoke through an interpreter. I'm from Amsterdam. The shrill voice was a Frenchman. I don't know the words. It said they were loud and unequal. Anger, but also afraid. The voice was harsh. Not so much shrill as harsh. The gruff voice said repeatedly, Sacre, diable, and once, Mon Dieu.
Witness Jules Mignot, banker of the firm of Mignot and Sons, Rue de Lorraine. Yes, I'm the eldest Mignot. Madame L'Espanaye made frequent deposits in small sums. The third day before her death, she took out in person the sum of 4,000 francs. This sum was paid in gold, and a clerk accompanied her home with the money.
Witness Adolphe Lebon. I'm clerk at Mignot and Sons. On that day at noon, I accompanied the Madame L'Espanaye to her residence with the 4,000 francs, tied up in 2 bags. Upon the door being opened, the Mademoiselle L. appeared and took from me one of the bags and Madame the other. I bowed and departed. I saw no one in the streets at the time. The Rue Morgue, it's a by-street. It's very lonely.
Witness William Bird Taylor. I was one of the group who entered the house. I'm an Englishman. Lived in Paris 2 years. Heard the voices fighting. The gruff voice was a Frenchman. Could make out words sacre and mon Dieu. And there was a sound of people struggling, a scraping and scuffling sound. The shrill voice was very loud, definitely not an Englishman. I think probably German. It might have been a woman's voice. No, I don't understand German.
Now, the puzzle. 4 of the witnesses said that the door of the chamber in which they found the body of Mademoiselle L. was locked on the inside when they reached it. The windows, both of the back and front room, were down and firmly fastened from within.
The door leading from the front room into the hallway was locked, with the key on the inside. Every inch of the house was carefully searched. Every flue in the house was swept, and all the chimneys were said to be too small to admit the passage of a human being. A trap door on the roof was nailed down very securely, did not appear to have been opened for years. Further, there was no back passage by which anyone could have descended, while the party proceeded upstairs. The body of Mademoiselle L'Espanaye was so firmly wedged in the chimney that it took four people together to pull her down.
Witness Alfonso Garcio, undertaker. I reside in the Rue Morgue. I am born in Spain. I hear these voices fighting. The gruff voice, now he was a Frenchman. And the shrill voice, it was an Englishman, I'm sure. Oh, no, I don't understand English, but I judge by the intonation.
Huh, this one's brief.
Witness Alberto Montani, confectioner. I was first up the stairs. The shrill voice was a Russian. Me? I'm an Italian. No, I have never conversed with a native of Russia.
Ah, good. The medical observations on the deceased. Witness Paul Dumas, physician, was called about daybreak to view the bodies. They were both then lying on the bed frame in the chamber where Mademoiselle L. was found. The corpse of the young lady was much bruised and excoriated. The fact that it had been thrust up the chimney would sufficiently account for these appearances. The throat was greatly chafed. There were several deep scratches just below the chin, together with a series of livid spots, which were evidently the impression of fingers. The face was fearfully discolored, and the eyeballs protruded. The tongue had been partially bitten through. A large bruise was discovered upon the pit of the stomach, produced apparently by the pressure of a knee. In the opinion of Monsieur Dumas, Mademoiselle L'Espanaye had been throttled to death by some person or persons unknown. The corpse of the mother was horribly mutilated. All the bones of the right leg and arm were more or less shattered. The left tibia much splintered, as well as all the ribs of the left side. Whole body dreadfully bruised and discolored. It was not possible to say how the injuries had been inflicted. A heavy club of wood, or a broad bar of iron, a chair, any large, heavy, and obtuse weapon would have produced such results, if wielded by a very powerful person. The head of the deceased, when seen by witnesses, was entirely separated from the body, and was also greatly shattered. The throat had evidently been cut with some very sharp instrument, probably with a razor. Lastly, witness Alexandre Etienne, surgeon, was called with Monsieur Dumas to view the bodies, corroborated the testimony and the opinions of Monsieur Dumas.
It was a murder so mysterious, so perplexing in all its particulars. The police were entirely at a loss, not the shadow of a clue apparent.
And a postscript here mentions that Adolphe Le Bon, the clerk from Mignon & Sons, who accompanied Madame L'Espanaye home with the gold, has been arrested and imprisoned, although nothing beyond the facts already detailed appears to incriminate him. Well, friend, what do you think about these murders?
My dear Dupin, I am left to agree with all of Paris. This thing is an unsolvable mystery. I see no possible trace to the murderer.
We must not judge by this shell of an examination. The Parisian police are cunning, but no more.
You think so? I'd have thought this Captain Vidocq seemed...
Vidocq is a good guesser and a persevering man, but without educated thought, he errs continually by the very intensity of his investigations. He impairs his vision by holding the object too close, loses sight of the matter as a whole. Thus there is such a thing as being too profound.
Look here, I'd measure profoundness to be a desired
By
trait.
undue profundity, we perplex and enfeeble thought. It's possible to make even Venus herself vanish from the firmament with scrutiny too sustained, too concentrated, or too direct.
Well, what approach other than this profound scrutiny do you...
Do I suggest? As for these murders, let us enter into some examinations for ourselves before we make up an opinion respecting them. An inquiry will afford us amusement. Besides, Monsieur Le Bon once rendered me a service for which I am not ungrateful. We will go and see the premises with our own eyes. I know Gerard, the prefect of police, and shall have no difficulty in obtaining the necessary permission.
Well, we obtained the permission and proceeded at once to Rue Morgue, a miserable thoroughfare between Rue Richelieu and Saint-Roch. Easy enough to find the house. On the opposite side of the way, there were still many persons curiously gazing up at those closed shutters. Before going in, Dupin insisted on a walk around the block, assessing the neighborhood and the rear of the building with a minuteness of attention I couldn't see the point of it. We were finally led in the front and escorted throughout by a gendarme. We went in the chamber where Mademoiselle L'Espanaye was found and where now both bodies lay. In the room, left perfectly in its disorder, Dupin scrutinized everything, including the bodies, and personally I saw nothing beyond what had been exhaustively stated in the Gazette des Tribunaux. This occupied us until dark, when we made our way home. Though on the way, Dupin stopped in at the office of one of the daily papers. I've told you, her whims are manifold. She declined any more talk of the murders until noon the next day. Then suddenly...
Did you observe anything peculiar at the scene of the atrocity?
No, nothing peculiar, at least nothing more than we both saw stated in the papers.
Oh, dismiss the idle opinions of the Gazette. It appears to me they consider this mystery unsolvable for the same reasons I believe it quite simple of solution. The police are confounded by two things: the seeming absence of motive and seeming impossibility of reconciling the voices heard from the stairwell with the fact that no one living was discovered in the room, and that apart from the stairwell full of witnesses, there were no apparent means for a living person to exit the room.
Right.
The wild disorder of the room, the corpse thrust with the head downward up the chimney, the frightful mutilation of the body of the old lady, all these considerations have sufficed to paralyze the powers of the government agents.
Quite reasonable to be confounded, I should say. Even as you state it, it's confounding.
Ah, you and they have fallen into the gross but common error of confusing the strange with the obscure. What can the fourth dimension teach us if we listen? Perhaps it should not be so much asked what has occurred as what has occurred that has never occurred before. In fact, the degree of ease with which I shall arrive, or have arrived, at the solution of this mystery is in converse to the degree of difficulty adjudged by the police.
It's so... when you say have arrived, you... that is to say, my friend, are you...
I am now awaiting a person who, although perhaps not the perpetrator of these butcheries, must have been in some measure implicated in them. Of the worst portion of the crimes committed, it is probable that he is innocent. I hope that I am right in this supposition, for upon it I build my expectation of reading the entire riddle. I look for the man here, in this room, any moment.
Here?
It is true that he may not arrive, but the probability is that he will. Should he come, it will be necessary to detain him. Here are pistols, and we both know how to use them when occasion demands their use.
You're... Dupin,
Follow me. Just like the journey from the fruit cellar, its steps, one after the other. It's simple. It was fully proved by the evidence that the voices in contention heard by the party upon the stairs were not the voices of the women themselves. Yes. This relieves us of all doubt upon the question whether the old lady could have first destroyed the daughter and afterward have committed suicide. I speak of this point chiefly for the sake of method. For the strength of Madame L'Espanaye would have been utterly unequal to the task of thrusting her daughter's corpse up the chimney as it was found, and the nature of the wounds upon her own person entirely preclude the idea of self-destruction. Yes. Murder, then, has been committed by some third party, and the contentious voices of this third party were heard from the stairwell. Let me now return to what was peculiar in that testimony. Did you observe anything peculiar about it?
All seemed to agree the gruff voice was a French male, and there was much disagreement as to the shrill voice.
That was the evidence itself, not the peculiarity of the evidence. You have observed nothing distinctive, yet there was something to be observed. The witnesses, as you remark, agreed about the gruff voice. They were here unanimous. But in regard to the other shrill voice, the peculiarity is not that they disagreed, but that while an Italian, an Englishman, a Spaniard, a Hollander, and a Frenchman attempted to describe it, each one spoke of it as that of a foreigner. Each is sure that it was not the voice of one of his own countrymen. The Frenchman supposes it the voice of a Spaniard. The Dutchman maintains it a Frenchman. The Englishman thinks it the voice of a German. The Spaniard is assured that it was that of an Englishman. The Italian believes it a Russian voice. A second Frenchman differs with the first and is positive that the voice was that of an Italian. And not a one of them speaks or understands the language of the country they presumed the voice to hail from. Now, how strangely unusual must that voice have been, in whose tones even denizens of the 5 great divisions of Europe could recognize nothing familiar. I will now merely call your attention to 3 points. The voice is termed by one witness harsh rather than shrill. It is represented by 2 others to have been quick and unequal. No words, no sounds resembling words were by any witness mentioned as distinguishable. I know not what impression I may have made so far upon your own understanding.
Well, that it's something
I do not
nagging
hesitate
about
to
these...
say that legitimate deductions from the testimony respecting the voices alone are sufficient to engender a suspicion which should give singular direction to our investigation.
The direction, then, is that
Let us now transport ourselves in fancy to this chamber. Picture it in your mind. What shall we first seek here?
The chamber. The chamber was locked from...
Exactly! You follow! We seek the means of egress employed by the murderers. It is not too much to say that neither of us believe in preternatural events. Madame and Mademoiselle L'Espanaye were not destroyed by spirits. The doers of the deed were material and escaped materially.
Then how?
It is clear that the assassins were in the room where Mademoiselle L'Espanaye was found, or at least in the room adjoining, when the party ascended the stairs. It is then only from these 2 apartments that we have to seek exits. The police have laid bare the floors, the ceilings, and the masonry of the walls in every direction. No secret exits should have escaped their vigilance. But, of course, not trusting entirely to their eyes, I examined with my own. There were then no secret exits. Both doors leading from the rooms into the passage were securely locked, with the keys inside. Yes! Let us turn to the chimneys. After some 8 or 10 feet above the hearths, they will not admit through their remainder the body of a large cat.
They got the deuce out somehow.
Thus, we are reduced to the windows.
The windows!
The windows. Through those of the front room, no one could have escaped without notice from the crowd in the street. The murderers must have passed then through those of the back room.
Back.
Now, brought to this conclusion in so unequivocal a manner as we are, it is not our part as reasoners to reject it on account of apparent impossibilities. It is only left for us to prove that these apparent impossibilities are, in fact, realities.
Dupin, that's marvelous.
And marvelous it was. She revealed she'd already reached these conclusions in her imagination, so in her investigation of the rooms, she'd taken to solving this window egress thing. It seems obvious now, but of course it had to be the deuced windows. Noting they were both fastened and nailed shut, the police had eliminated the rear windows as egress. But Dupin, her imagination has led her here. She never wavers. She's already reckoned the windows are where to look, and she eventually sorts that if a nail is removed, a hidden spring within the sash pushes the window to refasten itself.
There must be something wrong about the
other
other
nail. She'd removed the nail on the left window to mine out where the spring button was, but the nail was what had kept it from working on the left.
Ha!
She had divined it. The nail on the right window...
I touched it, and the head came off in my fingers, revealing an old fracture in the nail. I now carefully replaced this head portion in its indentation, and hey-ho, a perfect nail! The fissure was invisible. I gently raised the sash for a few inches. The head went up with it, remaining firm in its bed. I released the window, the spring closed it, and the semblance of the whole nail was again perfect.
I'll be...
She then jumped to the descent from a fourth-floor window with no passage. How could a fellow get down?
About 5 feet and a half from the casement in question, there runs a lightning rod. From this rod, it would have been impossible for anyone to reach the window itself, to say nothing of entering it. I observed, however, that the shutters of the fourth story were of the peculiar kind called by Parisian carpenters ferrades.
Well, she'd sussed out that the lower bit of these were trellised and made excellent handholds, and with the shutters fully opened, it might act like a bit of a swing over to the window. Though she made a point of saying, while it could be done, it was indeed a hazardous and difficult feat.
I wish to impress upon your understanding the very extraordinary, the almost preternatural degree of agility needed to accomplish it.
But we've established the murders were material. They were not preternatural.
Friend, my ultimate object is only the truth.
Certainly, that's the game.
My immediate object is to lead you to a place of juxtaposition, that very unusual activity of which I have just spoken, with that very peculiar shrill or harsh and unequal voice, about whose nationality no two persons agree and no syllables even are recognized.
Well, at these words of hers, there was a vague and half-formed conception. I seem to be upon the verge of comprehension, without power to comprehend. Well, perhaps you will know this one day. At times, we find ourselves upon the brink of remembrance without being able, in the end, to remember. My friend went on.
You will see that I have shifted the question from the mode of egress to that of ingress. It was my design to convey the idea that both were affected in the same manner, at the same point.
I see, of course, but...
Let us now revert to the interior of the room. In a word, why? Why abandon 4,000 francs in gold? Nearly the whole sum mentioned by Monsieur Mignot, the banker, was discovered in bags upon the floor. I wish you, therefore, to discard from your thoughts the blundering ideas of motive engendered in the brains of the police.
Fine point. This struck me as well.
Keeping now steadily in mind the points to which I have drawn your attention, that peculiar voice, that unusual agility, and that startling absence of motive in a murder so singularly atrocious as this, let us glance at the butchery itself. Here is a woman strangled to death by manual strength and thrust up a chimney, head downward. Ordinary assassins use no such modes as this. Think, too, the strength to thrust the body up a chimney so forcibly that several persons together were barely sufficient to drag it down. On the hearth were very thick tresses of gray human hair, bloodied, torn out by the roots. The throat of the old lady was not merely cut, but the head absolutely severed from the body. The instrument was a mere razor.
I shudder to imagine.
Now, you have properly reflected upon the odd disorder of the chamber, and we have gone so far as to combine these ideas. An agility astounding, a strength superhuman, a ferocity brutal, a grotesquerie and horror absolutely alien from humanity, and a voice foreign to ears of men of many nations and devoid of intelligible syllables. What, then, has ensued? What impression have I made upon your fancy?
A madman has done this deed. Some raving maniac escaped from a neighboring hospital.
Your idea is not irrelevant. But the voices, voices of madmen, even in their wildest paroxysms, are of some nation. Besides, the hair of a madman is not such as I now hold in my hand. I disentangled this little tuft from the rigidly clutched fingers of Madame L'Espanaye. Tell me what you can make of it.
Dupin, this hair is most unusual. This is not human hair.
I haven't asserted it is. Now I wish you to glance at this paper. It is a facsimile drawing of what the testimony calls dark bruises and deep indentations of fingernails and impression of fingers upon the throat of Mademoiselle L'Espanaye. Attempt now to place all your fingers at the same time in the respective impressions as you see them.
I cannot.
No, but the paper is spread out on a plane surface. We are not giving it a fair trial. The human throat is cylindrical. Here, wrap it around this and try the experiment again.
This is the mark of no human hand.
Read now this passage from Cuvier, his naturalist guide.
I still remember the moment. It was a minute anatomical and generally descriptive account of the large fulvous orang-outang of the East Indian Islands. The gigantic stature, the prodigious strength and activity, the wild ferocity, and the imitative propensities of this mammalia are sufficiently well known to all. I understood the full horrors of the murder at once. Oh, the dawning of this, I shall not forget it.
The description matches. I see that no animal but an orangutan of the species here mentioned could have impressed the indentations as you have traced them. This tuft of tawny hair, too, is identical in character with that of the beast in Cuvier's guide. But I cannot possibly comprehend the particulars of this frightful mystery. Besides, there were two voices heard in conflict, and one of them was unquestionably the voice of a Frenchman. What of him?
Yes, an expression attributed to this voice, the expression mon Dieu. Upon these two words, therefore, I have mainly built my hopes of a full solution to the riddle. A Frenchman was cognizant of the murder. It is possible, indeed it is far more than probable, that he was innocent of all participation in the bloody transactions which took place. The orang may have escaped from him. He may have traced it to the chamber. But under the agitating circumstances which ensued, he could never have recaptured it. It is still at large.
Oh my.
If the Frenchman in question is indeed, as I suppose, innocent of this atrocity, this advertisement, which I left last night upon our return home at the office of Le Monde, a paper devoted to shipping interest and much sought by sailors, will bring him to our residence. Here.
Caught in the Bois de Boulogne early in the morning of the 3rd this month, the morning of the murdering, a very large tawny orangutan of the Bornese species. The owner, who is ascertained to be a sailor belonging to a Maltese vessel, may have the animal again upon identifying it satisfactorily and paying a few charges arising from its capture and keeping. Call at number 12, Rue de Gonelle, Faubourg Saint-Germain-à-Troisième. Look, but
How was it possible?
that you should know the man to be a sailor and belonging to a Maltese vessel?
And she produced a ribbon, which she'd found at the base of the lightning rod. On it, a knot tied, which she somehow knows is peculiar to Maltese sailors. And yet, she says she doesn't know this for certain, but ascertains no harm done if she's wrong, and a great point gained if she's right.
He will reason thus. I am innocent. I am poor. My orangutan is of great value to one in my circumstances. Should they even trace the animal, it would be impossible to prove me cognizant of the murder or to implicate me in guilt. Yet above all, I am known. The advertiser designates me as the possessor of the beast. I am not sure to what limit his knowledge may extend. I will answer the advertisement, get the orangutan, and keep it close until this matter has blown over. Be ready with your pistols, but neither use them nor show them until it's signal from myself. Come in.
Uncle, it's the sailor. He comes? No.
Yes, he's tall, stout, muscular, sunburnt face, half hidden by whisker and mustachio, and sweating, his breath shallow and loud through his nose. I remember he bowed awkwardly.
Good evening, sirs. Oh, ma'am.
Sit down, my friend. I suppose you have called about the orangutan. Upon my word, I almost envy you the possession of him. A remarkably fine and no doubt a very valuable animal. How old do you suppose him to be?
I have no way of telling, but he can't be more than 4 or 5 years old. Have you got him here?
Oh, no. We had no conveniences for keeping him here. He is at a livery stable in the Rue du Bourg, just by. You can get him in the morning.
To be sure I will, ma'am.
Mademoiselle.
Mademoiselle?
Oui.
Forgive me.
Done. The orang. I shall be sorry to part with him.
I don't mean that you should be all this trouble for nothing, mademoiselle. I'm very willing to pay a reward for the finding of the animal. Anything in reason.
Let me think. What should I have? Oh, I will tell you. You shall give me all the information in your power about these murders in the Rue Morgue.
Stay!
No,
Stay
my
back!
friend. No,
Oh,
it's...
I can't!
We mean you no harm,
Please!
whatever. I pledge on the honor of a lady and of my country, we intend you no injury. I perfectly well know that you are innocent of the atrocities in the Rue Morgue. It will not do, however, to deny that you are in some measure implicated in them. From what I have already said, you must know that I have had means of information about this matter, means of which you could never have dreamed. Now the thing stands thus. You have done nothing which you could have avoided, nothing, certainly, which renders you culpable. You are not even guilty of robbery, when you might have robbed with impunity. On the other hand, you are bound by every principle of honor to confess all you know. An innocent man is now imprisoned, charged with that crime of which you can point out the perpetrator.
So help me God, I will tell you all I know about this affair. But I don't expect you to believe half of it. I'd be a fool if I did. Still, I am innocent, and I will make a clean breast if I die for it.
Do go on. The orang?
I recently was in the Indian archipelago, and we landed at Borneo. On an inland pleasure excursion, a mate and I captured this orang. My mate died, God rest him, and I was left with the creature myself. I'd meant to sell him, but he needed first to recover. Nasty splinter he got in his foot on the journey home. He was troublesome. For a good time I'd actually kept him in seclusion at my home. If you believe it, not easy.
Huh. Don't want the neighbors to know you've got an orang in the parlor.
That's right. Well, a few nights ago, I burned it out late with some shipmates, and I return in the middle of the night, and a terrible sight. He's broken out of my bedroom closet, and there he stands in front of the looking-glass, fully lathered, razor in his hand, and he's... The fellow's attempting the operation of shaving.
Heavens!
The devil!
Guess he learned it by watching me through the keyhole. I'm staring at him. I'm waiting. I've no idea what to do. I can't have this massive animal going about holding a razor, and Well, I'd always use this whip to keep him in line. I go to pick up the whip. He sees it, and old boy springs out the door, bounces down the stairs, and straight out the front door, still holding the razor. Oh, it's awful to think what I'm chasing him. He looks back now and then, gesturing. I nearly get to him. He runs off again. It's round 3 in the morning. The streets is quiet. He's taken off down this alley in the back of Rue Morgue, and this light catches his eye from a 4-story window. Like a shot, he's over there, climbing up this lightning rod on the back of the house. He grabs onto the shutters and just swings himself over, straight into the open window. Less than a minute, he was up and in there.
The shutters! You had it, Dupin.
Go on.
Maybe my fortunes have turned, I think. Maybe grab him on the way down.
But on the other hand, there was much cause for anxiety as to what the thing might do in the house. And our man follows the fugitive. Well, a lightning rod is ascended without difficulty, especially by a sailor. But when he arrives at the window, it's far to his left, and his career is stopped. The most that he could accomplish was to reach over so as to obtain a glimpse of the interior of the room. And at this glimpse, he nearly fell from his hold through excess of horror. Now it was that those hideous shrieks arose upon the night, which had startled from slumber the inmates of the Rue Morgue. Madame L'Espanaye and her daughter, habited in their night clothes.
What I saw there! Oh, it's too...
Best to say.
I'm not sure it was best for him, if I'm honest. But I suspect we were both too eager to hear the mystery's finish, gruesome though it was.
And he's... Well, the younger lady, she's laying down still. But he's grabbed the older lady by the hair, and he's flashing the razor about her face like this, doing like a barber. I don't think he means to hurt her, but she's screaming, she's struggling, and the screams change him into angry. And almost looking like he wants to quiet her, he just does this big sweep of his arm across her neck, and it nearly... Oh, and the sight of blood going everywhere turns him to a frenzy. He bares his teeth, and he jumps to the girl, grabbing at her throat, until she's still. And he turns and sees me there in the window.
My dear God.
Yes, and it's hard to explain, but the beast's fury converts into fear, he says. Dupin speculates the beast, conscious he might deserve punishment, wanted to conceal its bloody deeds. He's nervous and agitated, throwing and breaking the furniture, dragging the bed from the frame. In conclusion, it seizes first the corpse of the daughter and thrusts it up the chimney, as it was found, and then that of the old lady, which it immediately hurls through the window headlong. As the beast approached, the poor sailor flew down the lightning rod and ran home, gladly abandoning all concern about the fate of the O-ring.
By Jove, the words and sounds the witnesses heard from the staircase. They were the Frenchman's, our sailor's exclamations of horror and of fright, commingled with the fiendish jabberings of the O-ring brute.
Ingenious, Marshal.
Positively ingenious. Yeah, see what I mean? It sounds like a compliment, but, well, that's your whist player for you, I suppose.
Uncle, that was you. You were there. And so...
Well, I have little else to add. That O-ring must have escaped from the chamber and down the lightning rod just before the break of the front door. It must have hit the spring to close the window as it passed through it. Well, the creature was subsequently caught by the sailor owner himself. No idea how he managed it. And he obtained a very large sum from it from the zoo at the Jardin des Plantes. Anyhow, the bank clerk, Adolphe Lebon, was instantly released upon our narration of the circumstances, with editorial from Dupin, at the bureau of the prefect of police. The prefect could not altogether conceal his chagrin at the turn which affairs had taken, and was fain to indulge in a volley of sarcasm about the propriety of every person minding his own business. I remember the walk home.
Let him talk. Let him discourse. It will ease his conscience. I am satisfied with having defeated him in his own castle. Nevertheless, that he failed in the solution of this mystery is by no means the matter for wonder he supposes. For, in truth, Marshal, our friend the prefect is somewhat too cunning to be profound. His wisdom is all head and no body, like the pictures of the goddess Laverna.
Confound it, Dupin. The goddess who? You say our prefect is like
Or, at best, all head and shoulders like a codfish.
Ah.
But he is a good creature, after all. I like him especially for one master stroke of cant, by which he has attained his reputation for ingenuity. I mean, the way he has denié ce qui est et d'expliquer ce qui n'est pas.
Well, that look tells me you've no idea, have you? It's all right. I didn't either at the time. It was Rousseau she was quoting. Of course, I'll translate for you, shall I? And I think this should be the end of our story recording. Yeah, I think she would like that.
Of course, you know best. But tell me, what did Dupin mean?
I mean, my friend, his ingenuity gives him his famous ability to deny that which is and explain that which is not.
Well, there. Now you have it. She always left me wishing I had it.
What's that?
To imagination.
Imagination.
Imagination!
Thank you so much for being a part of this special show. We hope you enjoyed the show as much as we enjoyed making it for you. If you'd like to connect with us or help support Peninsula Players, please visit peninsulaplayers.com. That's PENINSULA players.com. And we hope to hear you again soon. This is Peninsula Players and Chicago Radio Theater signing off.